Right, so now we're going to remove the barrels from the crankcases, and in order to do that we need to remove all these cylinder base nuts, and as you can see they're all a special nut, serrated nut, and in order to get them off we have a special spanner, the infamous tri-core serrated spanner, 1/2 inch AF but with a serrated rather than flats, and it's thin. It's thin so that you can get it in between the fins and the top of the nut, and there it is, and then it's serrated. And I think it's like this because rather than a normal nut, because you can get so many more angles on it. I'm guessing that's why it's like that. It's pretty standard to most British bikes, and these spanners available from I think any supplier of British spares should sell these sort of tri-core spanner just for these cylinder base nuts. Okay, so how many have we got? I've forgotten. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I think we've got 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then we've got 10. We've got 10. So we just undo those. When it's off, that's it. The barrels all come off. Famous last words. Let's have a think. Yeah, I think the main thing we have to remember to do is we're going to tie up the tappets, because otherwise when we pull the barrels off, the tappets are just going to fall out into the crankcase. Number one, we don't want that, and number two, we'll then have no idea which tappet goes where, and again you really want to put them back in the same place where they came from. So what I normally do is I'll put a little cable tie around in the groove of the heads, and that just stops them falling down into the through the tappet blocks, and so they stay in situ when we take the barrels off. I'm trying to remember. I think that's all we have to do, really. Yeah, just by the by, we'll be coming back to this. So these are what's called the pillar bolts. So the cylinder head bolts go down and they screw into the pillar bolts, and then the pillar bolts screw into the barrel. So what we need to do is we need to check that the threads are okay in the pillar bolts, and then later on we need to check that the threads are okay in the barrel for the pillar bolts, because either can strip. Normally it's the thread into the barrels, because obviously that's alloy, these are steel. So these are the pillar bolts, and these dowels here are for the oil ways, because what happens is the oil sits in the head and it sits around the valves and it can't drain away, so there's these drain holes through the head, and they come down to there, and then they go down through the barrels, and any excess oil that's sitting around the valves drains down these oil ways. The trouble is that they are prone to leak. As you can see, they're fairly close to the edge of the gasket. On this one, I'm not sure if they've been leaking or not. Obviously there's an awful lot of oil and gunge around, but a lot of it, most of it seems to be coming maybe from the pushrod tubes, but it could have been coming from the head as well. It's difficult to tell once you've taken everything off, because obviously the oil just gets everywhere anyway. So Louis, who I know through sort of owning triples and so on, has reminded me that this sort of sandwich gasket is called a Courgasil gasket, and this is so it's sort of tin plate, I think, with like a fibre in between, like a sort of sandwich. And apparently I've not come across one before. I know of them, but I've not come across one before, and they were used on the early bikes. So I'm still trying to work out the actual age of this engine, because it's not got engine. I think I mentioned before, there's no letters stamped on this engine, because I think it is a replacement engine. The original bike is at the 72, but then I think it had a new engine fitted at some point, and this I think is a late engine with the tappets. I still haven't worked that one out yet, why we've got dome tappets rather than cups. But that's why I think there's no engine date stamped, because this is a new replacement engine. I don't know, probably 1975, but in a 72 bike. Right, okay, so I'm just going to loosen off these 10 cylinder base nuts. I'm going to put cable ties around the tappets, and then hopefully the whole thing will lift off, and then we'll see what we've got. And then we can start investigating and see what the wear's like on the barrels and so on. We'll take it from there anyway. Okay, so I'll get this on the tripod, I'll get some cable ties around there, and then we'll start taking the nuts off and lifting the barrels off. Okay, we're now going to remove the barrels. I'll just mention that the last video, I think I said, right, I've got the head off, I'm just going to go for a cup of coffee and then we'll come back and do the barrels. Well, that was something like 3 or 4 days ago now. A long cup of coffee, but you know, I'm just fairly busy with so many jobs and things at the moment. It's the first chance I've really had to get back on with it. But there we go. Right, so let's have a look. So we're going to loosen off these studs, and as ever, short sharp shock is the best way of loosening a stud or any nut. Short sharp shock. Let's start with the outer ones really. Okay, so I've now loosened off the 10 cylinder base nuts. Some I've been able to unscrew by hand, so they're off higher than others. Some I haven't been able to do by hand, so I can only do them as high, unscrew them as as much as I can get the spanner in between them and the bottom fin. Then I've put cable ties around the tappets to make sure. Sorry, press the wrong button. I put cable ties around all the tappets to make sure that when I lift the barrels off, they don't slide down into the crankcase, number one, and number two, I can put them back in the same position they came out in. The main thing to do now is to double check you have actually undone all 10 cylinder base nuts. I know it sounds pretty basic, but it's so easy to miss one, and then you're trying to lift the barrels off using increasing amount of force, and the reason they won't come off is because you haven't done one of the nuts. Right, okay, they're off. So now we're going to see if we can tempt the barrels off. They're either going to come off easy or they're not going to move at all. So keep fingers crossed. Okay, it's barrel removal time. Now, I have to say that I don't know of any good sort of cheap, clever ways of getting the barrels off. If I did, I would tell you, but I don't. So I'm going to try lifting them to begin with. I'm not really expecting them to move at all, but always worth a try. No, so I'm going to have to use the rubber mallet. Now, this is awkward because the only thing around are fins. There's no other bit really to knock on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the barrels on the end. I'm not going to hit upwards because I can bend a fin. I'm going to hit them sideways just to see, and sort of like stroke them up a bit to see if I can encourage them to let go at all. Right, okay. I'm going to get a block of wood, because on the base on this side there is a slight protuberance that you can get to on the actual, not on the fins, but on the actual cylinder base. So I'm going to get a block of wood and hit under there. Okay, so block of wood, not under the fins, but actually where the barrel, there's a slight protuberance where the base of the barrel just overhangs the crankcases. Absolutely bugger all. Sheesh. Ah, there we go. There we go. Did you hear that go? Well, it went. Let's see. Right, we release the other end, but this end does not want to go. Just check those washers aren't jammed. Yeah, that washer's jammed. The washers can jam on the studs. Merry minute, I'm just going to have a merry minute, find something to unjam. The washers that go under the studs, they jam, and that can stop the whole thing from coming up. So I'm going to release, this one's loose, but I'm going to release all the washers. Right, I've checked that I've got all the washers, I've prized all the washers loose, because they can jam on the stud and stop the thing coming out. So I'm now going to try giving it a bit more this end, which it has done. So I'm going to further loosen the nuts at this end, now that I can, because a bit more to try and allow this side to come up as much as it can, and then that should lift this side really. Come on. There we go, it's coming now. Come on. Come on, baby. There we go. Whew. Okay, barrel's off. Whew. Let's have a look. I'll find something suitable, but I can't, never mind. Right, first thing I want to do, protect the pistons and con rods. Everything looks pretty good in there. There's no major problems, there's no broken rings that I can see. No broken rings, no major scoring. Looks nice, looks nice. I'm just going to protect the pistons. You don't want them hitting these studs really. I mean, we might well be replacing them anyway, because we might be having a rebore, but depending on what we find, it could just be that we have a hone and new rings, in which case we'll be keeping the pistons. So, because they look okay, but obviously it depends. It depends what the barrels are like. I'm just going to have a quick look at the barrels, see if there's any obvious scoring or anything. Yeah, there's obvious vertical scoring on all of them. So they're quite, as those washers going off. Tappets. They're okay, just making sure my, yeah, oops, I'm losing washers all over the place now. But yeah, so sorry, there's scoring on the barrels, which might account for the oil consumption. But I need to measure the barrels as well, because they can be sort of cone shaped and wider at the bottom. They tend to wear at the bottom. I think where the pistons are going round, they're working sideways. You know, as the piston goes round, it goes sideways, and so they can look okay, the barrels, but they can actually be worn, you know, bigger, especially at the bottoms. So we need to measure those. So by the look, they certainly need a hone because they're scratched. Pistons, and I need to find out whether, I've not looked yet, whether these are standard or oversized pistons. Standard, quick look there. Let's see. I thought, yeah, I've gone through my rubber glove. So a quick look at, there's certainly, this piston's certainly oily, and this isn't by the worst by far. Well, I haven't measured them, but I'd say that they're standard pistons. There's no oversized marking on them. Just see what this one says. If it says any different, right? I don't think so. They'll all be the same. They've just got a part number, and that's about it. There's no plus sign, so I'm guessing that they're standard. I'll measure them, and we'll measure the bores. See what size we got, but just having a look now. No. So I think these are probably the original standard pistons. So they're not done badly, 50 odd years. No real sign of damage on them, you know, they're in pretty good condition, they're not bashed up or anything, so that's good. I'll have a quick peek into the, we'll do this later on, but you know, it's looking good. Camshafts seem okay, you know, there's no horror stories in there. But we'll probably investigate further. Well, we will investigate further later on with a view to deciding whether to do a full engine rebuild. Really, the only area of concern being the condition of the main bearing shells and the big end shells, which are on the crankshaft. Because of course they wear. Everything else seems fine, but the thing is, it's one of those, when you've got the engine out, it's a pain to rebuild the whole engine, but it's a bigger pain to put the engine back in and then have to then find out that the shells do need, the big ends have gone away. You have to take it all out again, then take it all apart all again, including taking all the head and that off again. So, well, I'll inspect it more later on. Let's have a look. There's no obvious, you know, damage. Nothing like a loose big end bolt, which has happened. Yeah. So there's no discernible wear. Of course, that's not to say there's not wears in the shells, but there's nothing like major. You know, there's nothing catastrophic like, oh my God. Sometimes you find when you open up an engine, everything's working fine. Anyway, good. We've got the barrels off. So I'll be taking the tappets out. I'll cut the cable ties, and then we'll just slide the tappets out, and I'll make a note of which one goes where and which way round they go, because of course they can go in two ways. And then when I've done that, then we'll have a proper look at the barrels and so on, and the pistons and so forth, and decide where to go from here. So I'm going to stop there. All I'm going to do is I'm going to take this gasket off, I'm going to take the tappets out, and then I'm going to give everything a really good clean before we go any further. Then before I work on the head and the barrels, we'll probably inspect and do an internal inspection as far as I can to see whether or not we think we need to whether we need to split the whole engine or not. But that's it for now. Barrel, heads off, barrels off, good.